So this is the second part of my discussion on realism. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the structure of the system as seen by realists. So the international system is seen as a kind of single entity. It's made up of nation states. Um, as I said, there is no overarching authority, so the nature of the system is anarchic. But then the system is seen as structured by the distribution of power among states. As I said, some states have more power than others. And, you know, there's this concept of great powers. Great powers arose in, for example, the 19th century. There were European powers like France, Germany, Russia, Britain. Um, their power was based on powerful military forces, the Navy in Britain, large standing army in Russia, large standing army in Germany and France. These were really the great powers at that time. So the structure of the system has to do with the distribution of power among states. And there are basically three different kinds of structure that theorists talk about. One is a multipolar system where you have several different states that have more or less equal amounts of power. A bipolar system is one where there are two major powers in the system, and we see this illustrated in the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the United States, each having pretty close to, a similar amount of power. They certainly had similar nuclear capabilities. The United States was always technologically more advanced, but the Soviet Union had was seen to have a large and well-equipped land army. It was nuclear weapons equipped, and it also had developed some chemical and biological weapons. It was a formidable adversary. The rest of the world was more or less encouraged or had incentive to ally themselves with one or the other superpowers. There was a non-aligned movement, so-called, at the time, where states that didn't want to take sides said that there could be another way to go. There could be another ideology. Or sorry, they didn't have to choose between capitalism or socialism. There could be a third way, but that really didn't get very far. In the bipolar world, it was seen as zero sum, meaning a gain for one is a loss for the other. So anything that benefited the United States was seen as a loss for the Soviet Union. Anything that benefited the Soviet Union was seen as a loss for the United States. So, for example, in 1956, when Nasser in Egypt kind of switched sides and the Soviet Union became an ally of Egypt, the United States pulled out its funding for the Aswan Dam. This was seen as a loss for the United States. A lot of proxy wars were fought in countries that were allied to either one of the superpowers, such as in Latin America, in Central America, in Africa, in Asia. You could see that Vietnam might have been a proxy war between the Soviets / Chinese and the United States fought out in Vietnam. But the point is that the two major powers didn't come to nuclear war. It was not a hot war directly between the two powers. It was a Cold War where they were enemies, but it wasn't a shooting war. So from this, the theorists say that if you have a bipolar situation, it's stable. It tends to be stable. Whereas a multipolar situation, especially if you have an odd number of powers, if you have 5 powers, for example, this creates conditions where some powers may ally against other powers, and the idea is, you have power balancing, but then the interests of states may shift, and it creates instability. So multipolarity is seen to lead to instability. And then uh, the final kind of structure, you have multipolarity, bipolarity, and then unipolarity. That's when there is a single great power that dominates the system. And you could see that after the fall of the Soviet Union, for a while, uh, and maybe now even still, the United States is the dominant world power. But there are rising powers that are seen to be soon threatening the hegemony or the dominance of the United States. Of course, one is China, right? We see India rising, but the biggest threat is seen to be China. Russia still wants to be seen as a large dominant power, but its capabilities were clearly damaged by the breakup of the Soviet Union and the fact that its military technology is out of date very much. A lot of money would have to be spent to modernize the Soviet or the Russian military. They're working on it, and they've got some, oil and gas money that the state is spending to modernize the military, but they have a long way to go. So really, the big rising power is China. And then we've got some other powers that could be superpowers if they wanted to. They've got the economic clout. That would be Japan, Germany, right? The European Union, if they ever got their act together to cooperate on foreign policy, which they don't, they could be a superpower, a power that would be equivalent to that of the United States. Anyway, that's the thing, structure of a realist system. So the last thing I wanted to say is there are some questions that realism is better at explaining than others. So realist theory is good at explaining why countries go to war. So I would like you to think about that as you read the chapter for this week on causes of war. There is a lot of conflict that can be explained by realist theory. So please do think about that. I want to also do a bit on institutionalism, liberal institutionalism, so-called idealism. I probably will do that tomorrow. And then the following days, other kinds of theories, alternative theories, social theories, feminist theories, constructivism. And we want to try to relate these to causes of war and also to some of our other issues as we go along. So I'm hoping that these talks will help. Let me know what you think, and I'm going to get to your posts here too. Thanks.